Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well. I was under the weather a couple of days ago and decided that the best thing for me was to get out of the house because sometimes you're sick and you have to lie down. Um, and that's great. And I did that and read Lonesome Dove while I was kind of in the phase of being under the weather and needing to lie down. But then sometimes you don't really feel that good, and the best thing for you is just to move around and go do something. So I decided to do something bad, which is go used book shopping again. And it's not really bad, but I've done a lot of it. I should probably slow down, maybe, we'll see. Who knows? Who knows? The are you buying enough books question is always floating around here. But it was perfect for not only making me feel better in my spirits sense, but also in the physical sense. Because I drove around Alabama on a brutally hot day. I would call it scorching, except scorching would imply that it was somehow dry, and it was so humid. It was in the 90s. But when you're in a car and you're driving through, for me, it was kind of a wooded area to go to different thrift stores and used bookstores like that. One of the things that you kind of forget when it's so hot is just how visually beautiful it can be. And there are these towering cumulonimbus clouds over me as I drove from bookstore to bookstore. And I just had a heck of a day doing it. So I want to share with you what I got today. And I hope you enjoy. I got some stuff that I'm really excited about. Some stuff that I've been looking for a long time. The first thing is a book that I've talked about on this channel as being something that I've been searching for at used bookstores. And I finally found it. And that's The Wind in the Willows by Graham Greene. In this interesting cover. It's a pretty cover, although in today's day and age, this does look like a cover that could have been done by AI, so I hope it's not that. Hopefully it was a real artist. But one of the reasons why I've been looking for this book so much, why I'm drawn to it, is because, for two reasons. One is that there's a YouTuber here. I don't know, he's not really on our little corner of BookTube necessarily, but he makes videos on Tolkien a lot. He's a real proper great kind English gentleman named Malcom Guite. I should link his channel below. He's just great company. He's full of just good-natured, good humor, insights into life. And he read this book out loud, similar to how Steve Donahue reads books out loud, as a membership thing on his channel. So I think I'm going to read this and then get a little membership and listen to him read it. And the second reason why I've been looking for this is because Harold Bloom likes this book. And Harold Bloom will come up in this video a little bit because he's a literary critic who I really respect. Even though I don't always agree with him, I really respect, like anyone who is a passionate person. He's hypnotizing to me. I can't get enough of people who are really into whatever they're into. And of course, in his case, it's reading, which is something I'm into. So Harold Bloom likes this book, and so that was enough for me to look for it, and I can't wait to read it. This will just be a good afternoon. And for those of you who don't know, this is a Kenneth Grahame children's classic. A bit allegorical in nature, but I'm excited. So, the next thing I got is something that is another Harold Bloom book, is Flannery O'Connor 3 Works. And one of the things that I saw on this is that a novel is called Wise Blood. Great title, very strange and beautiful. And one of my favorite, well, I wouldn't say favorite, but an artist who I really like is named Wise Blood, but Weyes. And she has an album called Titanic Rising that I've always loved. So I wonder if there'll be any similarities in her lyrics as can be found in this Flannery O'Connor book. We'll see. Here we got Candide by Voltaire. I'm not sure if Adam has read this and referenced it to me, or if it's The Stranger by Camus that I've been thinking of. But I also had to get this not only as a Penguin Classic, but look at that cover. Look at that guy getting dressed. Something licentious probably just happened, and that dog's like, what are you up to? So I'm excited to read this. Apparently this is a satire about being optimistic in a world that seems kind of random and senseless and not full of goodness at times. So I guess in a way perpetually relevant, but of course probably very, very relevant today. Moving back to the kids theme, we have here Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, which was adapted into a movie, I don't even know when, 2000s, late 2000s, something like that, with Jack Black, and that had that song, War, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. That might have been the first kind of strong anti-war sentiment that I was exposed to as a kid that gave for me, what I think is one of the strongest arguments against a war, which is that it's dumb. It's a dumb thing to fight over dumb things that don't have to be, things that you don't have to kill innocent civilians over, like who controls what part of land. Why would you kill people for that? And yet, all throughout human history, people are doing it. There's also lots of other socio-political complex things about war, and when you really get into it and read the books, and you say, well, you had to do this, you had to do this, but when you take a huge step back from it, a really strong argument against war is that it's dumb. And this book, I think, is sort of about that. I think on the back, I read the backs of most of these books, it says, it's both a children's fantasy classic and a scabrous satire on politicians, philosophers, scientists, indeed, humanity itself. So yeah, I'm excited to get to this at some point. I don't know when I will, but I have a growing children's section in my library in my room, which I should really show y'all because I just kind of put it all together. Anyways, so I'm really excited to have this on my shelf. Next is a book that I'm stoked to have because I got in a recent book haul a nice hardcover of Anthony Trollope's Barchester Towers. And that is the second book in the Chronicles of Barsetshire. And here's the first. It's The Warden by Anthony Trollope. Now, I don't know if I'm going to love this author yet. So I don't know if I would do this, but this cover, I like the painting, of course, but I don't like the graphic design above and around it. It feels, I don't want to say cheap, but it feels like it wasn't put, like no love was put into this, like I could have made that. I would have made that. You know what I mean? And so maybe I can create something that's a bit more arts and craftsy if I end up loving the book. Tell me if I should read this before I read Barchester Towers or if I should just dive into Barchester Towers first. I've heard you don't have to read this, even though it's the first in the series. But, this is an author whose subject matters, I guess in a sense, like Jane Austen's, on the back, on the page that you're reading, like a pub sheet or something, don't seem that interesting. A warden, the misapplication of church funds, kind of interesting. I'd read an article about that, but do I want to read a book about the misapplication of church funds? Of course, the punchline being, it's about being a great writer. Can you tell a story that's more than that finds more about humanity and all that? And of course, I've heard that Anthony Trollope does that, but I haven't read a book to find out. So, excited for The Warden whenever it comes. I have a section of Anthony Trollope, so it'll go next to Phineas Finn and Barchester Towers. Next, we got another premium classic, and this is Frederick Douglass. Full title, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. And for one thing, what a cover. This cover, besides it being beautiful in its own way, and, the fallen tree and the foliage, it's terrifying. These escaped slaves thinking it's like they're looking back, thinking they hear someone. I don't know that much about slave narratives, but this is probably the most famous one. It's the one that I've heard of. Published in 1845, long before the Civil War, 15 years and so on. This story is probably one of the stories like Helen Keller that feels like a human being overcoming something that would be impossible for most people to do. To escape slavery and teach yourself how to read and write and go on to become, one of the most eminent abolitionists of all time is just unbelievable that a human could do that. So, a great story of resilience and obviously a good story in the history of the United States. So I'm really excited to get to this. It shouldn't be too long, actually. We'll see. This is a great edition. Yeah, excited to have that. The next one, this is Call of the Wild and White Fang by Jack London. And I was so happy to find this because these stories, I've read Call of the Wild, but I've not read White Fang. But of course they seem connected, so it's great to have them in a single edition. This one was $2, for instance. This bookstore that I went to was, it's called 5 and 10, I believe. It's called Second and Charles. There's a store called 510 or something nearby. But yeah, Second and Charles. It's used books, except it's like a nice used bookstore, so the prices are a little higher than just like $1 to $2. They're normally around like $5 to $6 for a lot of used books, but they had a really great, extensive, organized classics section. And some of them were $2, like this one, and we'll see some other things that were just $2. funny enough, the most expensive thing I got here, I think, was The Wind in the Willows, because that's basically a new book. But most of these are between like 1 and 5, because I wanted to keep it down. Point is, how cool to find a $2 copy with no annotations, used book of these two stories. I read The Call of the Wild in school, and then I read it again for fun afterwards, and then I read, I think, it halfway through when I was on a mountaineering expedition on Mount Moran in the Grand Tetons, and that mountaineering expedition went badly, and we had a kind of a near-death experience, and I just kind of dropped the book without even thinking about it. Like, I just was kind of going through a little bit of a post-traumatic stress disorder thing right after that ordeal, and I just forgot about it. I didn't even DNF it. It just slipped out of my life. So I need to go back to it and read it. I've mentioned that story on this channel once or twice. So I need to tell it at some point, because it's a great story, but obviously it's kind of like a crazy story. A beautiful cover too. Nice water. It looks like a watercolor, but maybe it's not. Yeah, great writing. I really love the power of that writing. Underneath that, we have The Lay of Marie de France. And this is a woman poet from France, late 12th century. And I read one of her lays for a class in college. I read Bisque Levrette, and it was kind of like the Canterbury Tales in a sense. It's King Arthur's Knights, except there's sex involved in the stories. And they're really bizarre. They're really strange and dreamlike. So I'm excited to have a Penguin Classic of the collected ones. And one of the reasons why is because this is something I'm so excited that I got, is that one of my finds was Sir Thomas Malory works. Works meaning all of his works. This is everything that Sir Thomas Malory wrote. And of course, what he's most famous for is The Death of King Arthur, Le Mort d'Arthur. And this edition is just, I mean, it's beautiful, it's old. I don't love the color orange on this, but I like the actual knight, so maybe I'll do something with this, maybe I won't. The only question I have for y'all is that it's got those little marks on the sides, and I think that's foxing. I don't think that's mold or mildew. But if y'all think that's mold or mildew, let me know, and I'll either get rid of it or put it off to the side with other books that are potential candidates for having mold or mildew on them so that it doesn't spread. But man, I'm so excited to have this because I really want to read this and I'm forgetting his name. Something White. E.B. White, T.E. White, I'm forgetting. But his The Once and Future King, which I've heard is the best King Arthur narrative. And this is like the source material, but it's not quite as easy to read. So yeah, it'll be great. It's also, of course, in Middle English. But in the Middle English, it's easier to read than Chaucer's. So, stoked to have it. All right, after that, I just got another edition of the Holy Bible because the one I got in my earlier book haul, I think the one that I brought up with Adam, the pages are so thin, onion skin classic Bible pages that you can see through to the other side and the text shows through. So it's kind of a muddy experience to read, whereas this one, the text does not really show through. It's got this nice red kind of, what do you call that? The edge of the paper. But anyways, it's also a King James Version, which is good to have. Maybe at some point I should get another version. But Steve Donahue's Western Canon Starter Kit has some great selections from the Bible to read that I want to get into sooner rather than later, although I don't know how excited I am to go through it. We'll see. All right, the next two, these are also books that I've hauled before, but the editions weren't great and they had annotations. And I'm speaking of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Both with covers that I like. This is a nice little painting cover. Very mischievous young lad with his wooden sword. $1.50, pretty great. This one was $1.25. I was actually astonished how many tasteless covers of Huck Finn there were. Very strange, but I guess it's a book that's taught in school so much that you probably get a lot of cheap versions put out with people not thinking about the art. Both these are Signet classics, which I love, by the way. Signet does great, dense books with interesting introductions and great images, always, of the author right at the beginning. Like the Moby Dick one I have. It has a great, great picture of Herman Melville. Yeah, these books, they're American classics, but I never read them in full in school. I've never read Tom Sawyer, and I only read Huck Finn in passages, which is a crime, I feel like. So we'll see. We'll see how I like them when I get to them. I think I really will like them. From what I've read about Mark Twain, I was a German major in college, and he has this essay called "The Awful German Language," and you don't even have to speak German to find it hilarious because it's Mark Twain. But some of his insights are they just get better the better you get at the German language. Some jokes, 1 month into learning German are hysterical, and then 2 years there's jokes in that article that are so funny. Yeah, Mark Twain is a treasure. Next, we have two books that are rounding off, not in total, but my Charles Dickens collection. Nicholas Nickleby is the first one, and the second one is Bleak House. And both of these are really large books. I didn't realize how large they were. And I'm not actually so sure about Bleak House. I think this is late Dickens. I know this is early Dickens, but how late is Bleak House? It says 1853. When was this published? Nicholas Nickleby. Will it tell me on the inside cover? That's the question. Not 2005. I can tell you that. 1838, 1839. Okay, cool. Yeah, so Nicholas Nickleby, one of the earliest things he ever wrote, one of his earliest novels, because the Pickwick Papers, I guess, aren't novels, but I think this has a lot of the classic Dickens archetypes of orphans and injustice, cruel, rude, older people in authority positions, and plot twists, humor. We'll see how it goes. I'm really excited for it. I'm taking a bit of a gamble on buying a lot of Dickens books while I haven't read any of his major works yet, but I have an instinct that I'm really going to like Dickens. So there we go. And then, of course, Bleak House, to bring up Harold Bloom again, is the book that Harold Bloom lauds the most out of all of Dickens' works. It's not Great Expectations or Tale of Two Cities. It's Bleak House, which is so fascinating to me because it doesn't seem like a book that is getting a lot of, or gets a lot of other attention. So I've, by the way, had some great comments from people who watched other book hauls of mine talking about how Dombey and Son is one of their favorite Dickens books, and it's great to see that. I've also had comments from people saying, trollop over Dickens every time, which is pretty funny that people are making beef from old dead authors. It's just awesome. So far, I'm more drawn to the Dickens, but, you don't have to be on a side. They can both be great books. We'll see. Moving on, these are sort of, I think, some of my favorite ones that I got at the end. The last one is my favorite. I always do my favorite for last. First, we have the Burton Raffles translation of Beowulf. Those of you who know have watched my channel before, I love Beowulf, and I have read the Seamus Heaney translation of it twice, which blows my mind every time. And I also love Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which is a Middle English poem. Beowulf is Anglo-Saxon, but Sir Gawain is Middle English. And Burton Raffles, the translator of this, translated Sir Gawain in an edition that I love. I think in a, Mentor Classic that has a great cover. And his translation was wonderful. And I opened this, and I started reading a little bit of it, and I was getting a little bit comparison is the thief of Joyd by thinking about Seamus Heaney's translation, because the first word of Beowulf is famously a non-translatable word. It's like Hwet, Hwet or something like that. What does that mean? Well, it's hard to translate. It's sort of like a call into the story. It can be sort of like a sing in me muse type thing, except it's one syllable. There's not really an equivalent of it, and what the translator chooses for that first word is normally considered to be a bit of a marker for the flavor of the rest of the translation. And in Seamus Heaney's, the first word is so. The Danes, and it goes on. But it's so, period. And to me, I know it's one of those things where it's like sometimes the person shows you a piece of music that is just so simple, and then they're like, "This is genius, bro," and you're like, "It's the note E on a piano." It's for the Kanye West song "Runaway," but then actually when you get into it, you're like, "This is genius." So being the start of it is such a somber, grave, but down to business way to begin Beowulf, and it does set the tone. And one of the things that strikes me from Seamus Heaney's translation of Beowulf is how poignant it is. It's a really sad story, ultimately. It's epic in capital E, ways, but it's tragic. Burton Raffles' first word, this is how he translates Beowulf's first untranslatable syllable. Here it is. I'll just let you read it. Hear me! With an exclamation mark. That is so different. That's like gather around the campfire, fellas. We're going to tell a story. Do I like it? It's not bad, but it feels different in a way that makes me think, maybe this is going to be more chipper than I want it to be. But I just got to keep an open mind because I liked his other translation. I didn't like Burton Raffles' introduction to Sir Gawain and Green Knight. I found it to be really belligerent. He attacks other critics a lot in it for opinions that he doesn't fully explain, that I suspect that he's strawmanning, and then he assumes his own opinion is self-evident, but he doesn't argue for it. And it just comes off just being a little bit unnecessarily acidic. So we'll see if his translation here, if he calms down a little bit. But I like the cover. It's a signet. We'll see how it goes. I talk a lot about Beowulf in this. Okay, yeah, the next one is one that I actually got from the library, from their kind of bookstore that's an addition to their library. And I went there to donate a book because I wanted to support the library, and then I picked up this. And I saw this in a hardcover edition, but I didn't buy it when I was traveling, and I'm glad I didn't, because now I have it in a nice paperback, and it's 100 Best-Loved Poems. And this is a perfect thing for me to be getting, because I want to get into poetry, and, what can you do? Read 100 best poems. There you go. And of course, these are English poems. These, there's not going to be any Rumi in here or Rainer Maria Rilke. And some of these poems, of course, I'm familiar with. Walt Whitman, O Captain, My Captain. Marlowe, The Passionate Shepherd to His Love. Some of them are stereotypical poems. Oh yeah, Dylan Thomas, Do Not Go Gentle Into That. Good night. But I think it's a good place to start. I don't want to start by thrusting myself into John Milton. Paradise Lost, that's the best poem. I'm sure on this channel you get the sense of something that is true about me, which is that I generally go into new genres or new authors or into reading in general with works that are considered to be the best works, because that excites me and that makes me want to read them, even if they're kind of difficult. And that's just the way I enjoy reading the most. It's not to go into them with introductory works to work my way up. And maybe I should sometimes do that. And so this is an example of me hopefully doing that in a way that will make me love it more. Because maybe I've tried to get into things that I just kind of jumped into the deep end too quickly and missed out on something that could have been great. Or that was great, but that met me at the wrong time. For instance, trying to read The Brothers Karamazov when I was 15 and reading it like it was a brick. And then, of course, reading it this year and it being an imaginative feast. So yeah, I'm really excited to have this collection. And moving on, we got some. That's another book that I saw on that same earlier haul when I was traveling, and I saw these poems in the hardcover, but I didn't grab it. I saw this book too, and I also didn't grab it. And it's great that I didn't, because I have it now. And it's James Fenimore Cooper's The Last of the Mohicans. This author wrote a lot, but this is, as far as I can tell, the thing that has survived more than anything else. I had to watch part of this movie, or maybe the whole thing, in school, and I think I slept through it. So I should read it. I just heard that people love this on BookTube. Another great cover. One of the reasons why Penguin Classics is my favorite line, beyond the graphic design, beyond the introductions, is that they always select great paintings. Or not always paintings, but they often select paintings that are beautiful, that suit the book so well. The Frederick Douglass one here, again, so beautiful. And doesn't the color of that almost seem to suit the book in the same way the color of this does? It's so tasteful. And then, of course, they always give it cover painting, The Last of the Mohicans by Asher Durand. Interesting. I wonder if this was actually made by someone who read this book, or if it's the other way around and the book was inspired to have that title. Fascinating. Okay, and then we have the last two books. These will probably not be interesting to that many people, but they are super interesting to me, and they'll probably be super interesting to a couple of y'all. And this is Melville, a collection of critical essays edited by Richard Chase. This is the first book I've ever bought, and first book I ever will probably read, that is a collection of critical essays. because I tend to stick to the original source material more than I like to go through meta text. But that's not true for Moby Dick, because you can talk about it forever, and it's fascinating to talk about forever. And one of the things that makes Moby Dick stand out is that it can withstand people talking about it in so many different ways. Sometimes a work gets talked about so much that when you actually read it, you feel that it's been overburdened, and that, I don't want to say overrated, but it's almost like most works can't really sustain so many interpretations and then be believable. It seems like people and critics are getting carried away. But Moby Dick doesn't seem to suffer from that. Why that is a bit of a mystery. I have my theories, of course, which I've talked about in my Moby Dick video about it being written instinctively, without an agenda in mind, without an ideology in mind, but more of just a flow state subconscious outpouring of a genius. That makes it magical. And it's why people like Hubert Dreyfus can create, an 8.5 hour online seminar about it, and it'd be fascinating, and about his interpretation. And then you can listen to, any number of online critics, or I'm guessing in this book, and still feel like, oh, there really is something there. Beautiful cover. Look at that. It looks like a lightning bolt. Obviously horrifying cover. This is cruel. Whaling is awful, but point is, it's a crazy cover. So I'm really excited to have this. And then the thing I'm most excited for, and that is first-hand accounts of the sinking of the ship, the Essex. And for those of you who don't know, who have never read Moby Dick or don't know this part of history, is that in 1820, I believe, 1820, the Nantucket whale ship Essex was cruising in the Pacific about 1,000 miles away from the nearest shore, if my memory is serving me, when it was repeatedly rammed by an 85-foot sperm whale. And the crew, about 20 people, I think all of them survived the initial sinking of the ship. It floundered, twisted, and sank to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean because it got destroyed by an animal. Crazy. And these 20 people didn't want to go to the nearby islands because they were afraid of cannibals. So they started off for South America, which is 3,000 miles away. And in the end, about only half of them survived, and they ended up resorting to cannibalism. I think the book here says the very thing that they sought to avoid on the islands. And a narrative of that account was written down by the first mate of the ship named Owen Chase. And this account was published serially in some magazines, I think even in the Atlantic. And a young whaleman got a hold of this account and read it and studied it fastidiously and wrote pages of notes about it. And that whaleman's name was, of course, Herman Melville. And he was inspired by this story. I don't know if I should say to write Moby Dick, but it certainly inspired the events that take place in the book. And Herman Melville's notes are in this edition, as is a cabin boy's notes. And if you had to guess, if you know this subject, and you had to guess who wrote the introduction of this book, you would guess it on your first try, because of course it's Nathaniel Philbrick, who wrote In the Heart of the Sea, The Sinking of the Whale Ship Essex, which I have not read. But of course, he almost surely is drawing on these first-hand accounts. Thomas Nickerson is the first, as the cabin boy. Owen Chase was the first mate. The captain's name was Pollard, and someone talked to him and published accounts. But I'm just going to be swallowing this whole, because it's one of those historical events that bleeds into one of the greatest imaginative works, for me, of all time. And speaking of which, when I first saw this, famous scene you see in all these covers, which is a small whaleboat, and then the whale's just massiveness pretty much overcoming the small whaleboat. I thought it was so cool. And then I saw the shape above it, and I was like, what is that shape? It looks like an iceberg. What? And then I realized it's scrimshaw. That's probably whalebone. And what I'm wondering is, I wonder if this is an actual piece of scrimshaw and whalebone that someone drew on. Or if it's just graphic design. That's so fascinating. But, this is just going to be so cool to read. how can an animal take down a whole giant wooden ship? It speaks really to the colossal epic nature of both Wales and the book Moby Dick. So yeah, I don't read very much nonfiction, which I should rectify, but maybe I'll start by rectifying it with this. So yes, that's my book haul. That was awesome. It's cool because at this point I've got most of the major classics for building my library in my room, and now I'm kind of rounding it off with books more like that Whale Ship Essex book because they aren't massive classics, but they fill in my interests. So as I go out book shopping, I kind of know what I want more, which is really exciting. Well, yeah, thank you for watching. I'll probably make a video pretty soon about Silver Canyon by Louis L'Amour because I just finished it this morning. Maybe I'll make it today, actually. We'll see. And yeah, have a great day, BookTube. Thank y'all. I'm going to read some Tale of Genji, make some music, and live my beautiful life, and I hope you're living yours. I will see you next time. Bye, everyone.